Hello, freak bitches.
But, we couldn't figure out how to put the different fighting sports together, right? So whose rules do you use?
Right.
I mean, and so really the basis of the UFC was always, no rules became, this huge thing, but it was also whose rules do you use? Mm-hmm. I mean, how are you going to get a boxer against a jiu-jitsu guy?
Right.
What are you going to use? You can't. There's no rules you can use.
Did anybody try to gouge eyes? Was that legal in the early one?
Well, you know what? I mean, I always would hear about these Wing Chun masters. They'd had 50 ways to pop your eye out with their thumb. And I kept calling them, going, bring your thumbs and do it, man. Don't talk about it. Come and pop everybody's eye out.
What would you have done if a guy lost an eye, though?
What would you have done? We'd pick it up. I mean, what are you going to do? What would we do? Come on. There's a reality to fighting that you know better than most people on the planet, right? If you're defending yourself, whether it's from a right hook, right cross, an elbow, a knee, or having your eye gouged out. You're blocking. You're aware. If a guy comes at you with his thumbs up to do the gouge, you're in a defensive position.
Well, it is interesting, though, how many people are getting poked in the eyes now when it's illegal and how often it happens and the reality of how devastating the results are. When guys get their corneas scratched and they get a fingernail in the eye, they get a finger jab in the eye, even if it's accidental, man, they scream and run away. And
eyes are sensitive. Is it any different in other sports? It's the same in football if someone gets their hand inside the helmet. It's same in boxing. In the old days, guys used to do stuff to the gloves. So
Roberto Duran versus Davey Moore. He thumbed him in the eye, and he was kicking his ass anyway, but Davey Moore couldn't see out of his eye, and then Roberto beat the fucking shit out of him.
So... the UFC didn't invent this.
No, thumbing is a long-time strategy in boxing, and they actually developed gloves that have the thumb pinned down because of that. Because in the old days, the thumb would detach from the glove, and even when it's like stitched in a little bit, you could still kind of get it in there. You can get it in there if you're just trying to poke a guy in the eye, which many people did do. That's definitely a dirty trick.
Well, it is a fight.
Yeah.
I remember Shamrock was who did he fight? This was like UFC 3 or 4. He said it was maybe one of the preliminaries. Someone reached into his Speedos and moved his cup out of the way so he could knee him. And Ken was going, dude, we're fighting. If you want to, we can get together later. But, for right now, hands out of my Speedos.
Well, there was a fight between Gary Goodridge and the Pedro in Brazil, a famous fight. It was like straight up Vale Tudo, no gloves, no rules. And Gary Goodridge reached into his fucking pants and grabbed his balls and crushed them. And Gary Goodridge was...
I guess that is the cockfighting part we were talking about.
I'm pretty sure it was Gary Goodridge.
That doesn't sound like his style, but you know better.
Back in the day.
He figured that was playing to his strength. He'll yank your Franklin.
This was, I'm pretty sure it was Gary Goodridge. Yeah, Gary Goodridge versus the Pedro. This was way back in the day from 1997. And vicious groin
97
attacks.
Isn't back in the day.
Yes, it is. It's still back in the day.
Not to me.
Not to you. Well, you were
retired.
You were in the game for 4 years by then. Yeah, dude reached into his pants and fucking crushed his balls.
Do you know what Forrest Griffin said to me at the 20th anniversary? He goes, I love the early UFCs. He goes, I would have entered earlier, but I didn't want to wear those Speedos. I wanted to wear man pants.
That sounds like something Forrest would say. When you guys first created the UFC in 1993, how long did it take from the initial idea to the first pay-per-view?
Whoa. You know what? Nobody's ever asked me that, Joe. Art Davey called me to pitch me War of the Worlds in April of 93, and we were on in November.
Really?
So, and you need 3-month lead time for pay-per-view, so, it was a go.
Wow. So you guys realized right away what a great idea this is going to be.
Oh, I realized that on Art's call, How can you not? Same with you. You saw it. You loved it. I heard about it. I really did see it as a live, a real-life Mortal Kombat. That is really what I saw when I imagined what it would look like, And I thought, who would not watch that? I'm watching it. It's my show. I probably would pay myself to watch it. I mean, it's just, how can you not watch that?
I got aboard, like I said, in 94. I found the video of UFC 2. And I don't think UFC 1 was even available on video, right? Wasn't there some sort of a dispute?
No, it wasn't a dispute, but Don Gold, you know, who
Sure,
we
I
all
know
know and
Don.
love and is still at the UFC. He bought 2 and at the same time bought 1. And back in those days, you tried to release the videos to be fresh. So he didn't want to release 1 before 2. He wanted 2 to be the first one, come out very close to the event, all the hoopla, and then later on added 1. Also, as you know, 1 had arguably the worst commentator team in the history of sports.
Bill Goldberg and Jim Brown.
Jim I liked. Jim Brown was cool then. I still think he's cool. But what's Superfoot, man? Super
Bill
moron.
Wallace.
You know.
How dare you? How dare you?
You
He's a
know.
goddamn hero. He's a karate hero. Bill Superfoot Wallace.
He's a karate hero? I thought he was
He's a karate hero.
Is that what he did?
Oh, he was a badass kickboxer. Did you not know?
Kickboxer. Of course I knew. I was standing
you?
backstage, and I'm trying to explain to him the name of the show.
Right.
Which is not the Ultimate Fighting Challenge. Like, it's, you know, maybe it's just a subtle difference, you know, but to me it meant a lot.
Right.
Championship versus challenge. I'm trying to explain it to him. And he is practicing his kicks over my head. It's not, I'm not such a tall guy, but he was a high kicker, right? So he's doing these kicks over my head as I'm going, Bill, try to remember the name of the show.
So he's just showing off or something? What is he doing?
I think he was
being silly?
being silly, yeah, and just showing he was too cool for school. Yeah, I got it. And I said to him, I go, are we going to see any kicks like that? He goes, no, you do that in a real fight, they'll rip your balls off. I'm like, dude, isn't that what you teach? No, he's a jerk-off. He's not a hero. He's a jerk-off. You know what he did? Joe, there's only a couple, well, there's actually more than a couple of people I'm, you know, maybe still annoyed at. Back then, before email, right, when you wanted to communicate something, you had to write it down, put it in an envelope, use a government-issued like form of sticker thing you put on an envelope, and you sent it through a government process, and it was called the mail, right? Okay, so there's no email. So Bill Superfoot shows up, gets the name wrong, burps into the thing, pays no attention, does a horrible job, takes the money, and then like 3 days later in Black Belt Magazine, an editorial comes out how he says he's totally against it. So he must have written that
Before he did
like
it.
6 weeks before, you know?
So he just did it for the check?
He did it. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that big a check. It was probably $2,500. I mean, if that was life changing for him, he's in bad shape. But I think he didn't like it. Like a lot of the guys that I think of as paper tigers. Mm-hmm. Right. I think it was a threat.
I saw him fight live. He was a badass kickboxer. I saw him fight live deep into his 40s.
He came out of an era of kickboxing when it really was a great thing to watch, right? And he was a great kickboxer.
Yeah, he's from the Chuck Norris era.
Absolutely. And there was a bunch of guys. What's his name? Rick Rufus.
Rick the Jet Rufus.
Yeah, tried to get him. Benny the Jet.
Benny Jet Urquidez.
Yeah. I mean, I was after all these guys, and it was just a little bit too late in the day for them, right?
For Benny. Benny was, they were retired.
And you know, and you're right. I shouldn't go off like that. As a kickboxer, he was something. He really was.
You just didn't enjoy working with him.
I didn't enjoy working with him. I thought it was bullshit to show up ready to condemn something or already have condemned it and not pay enough attention to get the name right on something that was as history-making as our first event. But anyway,
well,
maybe
now
it's better they were horrible because it just goes down in the record books as the worst commentating team of all time.
Well, it goes down as the beginning and everything's. I mean, I sucked when I first started doing it too. It just no one had any background in it. No one knew what to do.
Yeah, you know, I didn't know about your fighting background when I asked your manager to do it. What I liked was your comedy style. I liked your persona. And when I talked to Jeff, he goes, you know, he was a kickboxer or something. You know, I forget what he said. It was like, it wasn't very specific. I was like, really? He was a fighter? That's how I found out about it. But I always thought you had a tough guy persona that seemed very right for the show. And we needed someone, God knows, that could talk when all hell was breaking loose, because hell broke loose pretty regularly in those days.
Yeah, and you had a couple guys that were doing the post-fight interviews that just weren't so good at it. They just weren't so good at media. Like Tony Blauer, who's a really good martial artist, knows a lot about self-defense. And
we had to choose between people that sort of knew what was going on and real announcers.
Right.
I mean, that was the choice because we couldn't find anyone. Do you know Brian Kilmeade, started out doing this too?
Who's Brian Kilmeade?
He's on a show called Fox and Friends. It's like...
He started out doing this?
He did...
Oh, I know exactly who that guy is.
1 through 5, I think. And Brian, if you're listening or anyone knows Brian, I'm sorry if I got the number wrong, but and Bruce Beck.
Bruce Beck was excellent.
Bruce Jeff
Beck,
Blotnick,
Bruce Beck, to this day, I owe Bruce a debt of gratitude. He gave me some really good pointers when I first started doing the post-fight interviews. He gave me some real good pointers on like what to say or what to say if you're stuck, and like how to do it.
He's a pro, and
he's a really good guy too.
So did Blotnick.
Yeah, he was
to have
a great
Jeff
guy
in
too.
there,
Great guy.
That was good.
He was Olympic gold medalist. I mean, an awesome dude too. Really, really, he was a great guy. It's so sad when he passed. I really miss that guy. He was really fun guy to do commentary with too. Just a real genuine, nice person. Great guy to be around.
He had this, like before the show or backstage, or if there was any problem, he was unflappable, and it just kind of gave off a calm.
Sure,
it sort of helped because like not everybody on the team was calm.
Right.
He was.
Yeah. He was a great wrestler too. Knew a lot about wrestling, and eventually developed his knowledge of MMA, jiu-jitsu skills, and was really interested in learning. I remember there's some videos of him rolling with Frank Shamrock, like very, very early in the day, back I think when Frank was the champion. And
that's about the time of it. Yeah.
I left right when Frank won, when he beat Kevin Jackson and armbarred him in Japan. I didn't go to the Japan show. That was when I quit. I was like,
when did you quit?
About 98, somewhere around then, which is right about when Frank
won
the title.
Sick of the UFC at that point. I really was. It was miserable.
It was weird for me too.
Yeah.
It was like it was all these little tiny propeller planes to these strange places. Augusta, Georgia, and Dothan, Alabama.
Augusta wasn't, I kind of liked Augusta.
You liked Augusta?
I mean, that's
wasn't bad. Good barbecue.
Yeah, good barbecue and somewhat friendly town. As opposed to Charlotte, where they invited me never to return. The chief of police said to me, "If you come back, I'm not sure what I will arrest you for, but I guarantee you, I will arrest you."
Wow, what year was this?
The chief of police.
What year was this?
Well, that would have been on 5, so 95.
Wow, what a dick!
The chief of police.
It's
not like a guy in
What's
a car.
What's his name? Do you remember his name?
Dick something.
Hey, Dick, go
Dick
fuck
Weed,
yourself.
I think.
Dick Weed.
I don't know. What is that? How am I going to remember the? I mean, come on.
What a crazy abuse of power.
But it's all good now because John McCain said he would have entered MMA.
Now it's okay because the war hero said it's okay.
Yeah. It wasn't. McCain. I've said this before. Like I was sort of hoping Jerry Falwell or somebody would come out against. Somebody I could take. A war hero and powerful senator. But who was really a tough opponent to counter was the senator from Colorado that had the judo champion. He'd been an Olympic judokan. He was Native American. Ben Nighthorse Campbell. I don't
know who he is. Never heard this before.
Because we were kind of intimating that McCain didn't really know anything about the martial arts. And he went and found Ben, who was an Olympic gold medalist in judo, or a medalist. He might not have been gold. And he said, "Yeah, that's no good. You can't do it. You can't use elbows. What are you thinking?
Can't use elbows?"
Oh, whatever he said. Who knows?
Whatever
whatever it was he didn't like.
One of the early opponents, and that was all for a lot of folks that don't know. This is where it gets weird with John McCain. John McCain's wife, their family was there, right? And the Budweiser was in bed with boxing, and boxing
but Budweiser's in bed with the UFC now.
Now,
I mean,
but they weren't in '93.
Joe, I don't really think that's the connection. I don't think that's what it was.
What do you think it was?
I think it's odd. I mean, and for state control, right? That keeping a small federal government. That's kind of a Republican policy. But I think John McCain really wanted a national boxing commission. And I think that this was a good way to promote that. And I think he just was generally offended by the UFC. And I think it was a great way to get press. And it wasn't like people were coming out and going, "Keep the UFC, keep the he just could beat on the UFC and get as much press as he wanted. And look how different America is now. I mean, back then, that was the biggest problem facing the U.S. was the UFC. I mean, now look at the problems facing America and the world. And you go, we really lived in kind of a magical time, back
Wait a minute.
then.
What do you mean the UFC was the only problem the United States had? Were you not reading the news in 1993? There was a lot of shit going on in the world.
What?
Well, there's always things going on overseas. There's always things going on that the United States.
Had you heard of Osama bin Laden in 1993?
Okay, in that sense,
Afghanistan,
no.
that was a Russian problem.
Yeah, that was the Mujahideen back then.
Yeah, they were fighting the Russians, so they were cool with us.
Yeah, I think
Clinton years, the economy was good. I mean, he got, he diddled the intern. I mean, that was like the biggest thing.
Or she diddled him, or
whatever.
Something happened.
I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, that was the biggest issue. Well, I'm sure that what I was going to say. What I mean is there was certainly other problems in the world. There's violence and all sorts of things in our.
Not if you were reading the media. Apparently, it was.
Was it really
UFC.
that big of a deal? Well, maybe it was you because you were really close to it too.
I'll tell you what. For me, it was. It was riding the tiger, right? Because it was great to be in Mad Magazine. It was great to be the final episode of Friends when Courtney Cox's boyfriend enters the UFC and goes to it.
That's right.
It was great to be in Virtuosity, the Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe movie. I mean, there's big 95. I mean, it's really big media stuff. But on the other hand, when you're that visible, you're making a lot of people angry. If they don't like you, you're in their face all the time. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a tough thing. So yeah, it was fun till it wasn't. And the story. We had backed off that marketing, and the unified rules, were coming into place, and it was a very different sport.
Well, for a lot of folks who don't know what we're talking about, when the UFC first came out, there were no weight classes and there were no rules, and you could not. A fighter could tap, but no one could throw in the towel, and the referee couldn't stop the fight.
Well, that was on one. That changed by two. That was insane, by the way.
Yeah.
That was insane.
Okay, so this sort of highlights it. So that's the first episode, the first UFC. And then from there, slowly but surely, rules start becoming implemented, strategies changed, rounds, weight classes, gloves. Things got really interesting really fast, and I think a lot of people were unaware of it. If you think about the difference between 93 and 97, I came in 97 when Vitor made his debut. Gloves were still not mandatory. They were optional. Some fighters fought without gloves. But wasn't that the case?
Yeah, I was against gloves. After I saw Tank knock out, what's his name, Mantua, Tank was smart. He figured out, he goes, gloves are a weapon. I'm bringing them.
Yeah, you could hit harder with gloves on.
A lot harder.
You can hit harder. You don't worry about breaking your hands. And all the wraps and everything, they give you a much better thing to hit with. Bare knuckles, tricky. If you hit someone in the knuckle with bare knuckles in your forehead, you can break your hand very easily. It's really common, especially if you catch them with the last two knuckles, the ones by where your pinky is.
That was the most common injury in the early
breaking
days.
Hands.
And the Gracies were like, wear gloves.
And you're grappling with them, you actually can hold on to the gloves. I mean, if there's no rules about it. And guys use the gloves to finish submissions now, too. They started doing a lot of that. A lot of guys, the way Josh Thompson finished off, who was it? Pat Healy? I think it was Pat Healy. No, not Pat Healy. Yeah, it was. I think it was Josh Thompson and Pat Healy. Anyway, he grabs the glove as he's finishing the rear naked choke. Like he's going for the rear naked, and he switches to palm, and then he grabs the glove and uses the glove to finish it off. And I was like, that's slick. Well, it's totally legal.
Yeah.
It's totally legal to grab your own glove, and it's also totally legal to grab your own shorts, which is kind of interesting because one of the best ways to defend against kimuras is to just grab the inside of your shorts, like by your crotch, and just hang on for dear life.
I mean, the Gracies always use the gi for that type of effect. You know, I'm sitting here, I'm watching you do this, right? And I was watching your brain try to find that opponent. And you're a renaissance man of tough guy stuff. That's what you are. Because your comedy is like that. You've acted as a tough guy. You do comedy from a tough guy point of view. And I think you've probably, is this true? I think you've probably seen more MMA than anyone on the planet up close.
Maybe Joe Silva's seen more than me. Because Joe
but
Silva
he closes
goes
his eyes. I've seen him. He's over there. He's got his hands over his eyes.
It was Pat Healy who it was. Definitely Pat Healy that Josh Thompson fought. Yeah, man. Look, I've seen a lot. I've up close. I've been to I don't know how many events, but I've seen well over 1,000 fights, like up close and personal, and some of the best fights in the history of MMA.
In history.
But Joe Silva goes to all the Fox Sports 1 events as well now. Like over the last 2 years, he's outpaced me. It used to be we would see the same amount of fights, but over the last 2 years, I don't really do those Fox Sports 1 ones as much anymore. I do Fox and the pay-per-view, and then the Anik Florian team does the other one. But so Joe Silva might be the only guy on the planet that's seen more fights than me, unless really hardcore fans. There's some fucking psychos out there. Yeah, I've seen everything, every local show.
I don't know. It's hard. I think Joe fits into that category.
Oh, he's a psycho.
He's a psycho.
Joe Silva is a real MMA fan. That motherfucker loves MMA. Yeah, here it is. This is Josh Thompson finishing off Pat Healy. What a beautiful technique too. He's got the body triangle, and then he's using. It's hard to tell here. Nope, that's palm to palm. I'm wrong. That's just a regular palm to palm grip. I stand corrected, unless he finishes it in a different way and pulls the gloves. I definitely have seen someone do it before. I don't know why. I thought it was Josh because Josh is a very clever guy. He's
the point stands.
It's a good move.
The point stands.
That's a fucking badass technique, though. Let me see. No, well, I couldn't tell if he did it there.
Is that John?
Pull that. Yeah, that's John McCarthy.
Belt?
No, he's wearing a microphone, you fuck. Jesus Christ. It's like as he's finishing this off with the body. That's another thing, too, that's changed over the years, that body triangle, man. Guys, oh, yeah, he is doing it. He is doing it. He was doing it at the end. See, my memory is good. I thought my memory failed me. Josh Thompson's a bad motherfucker. Good jiu-jitsu.
So much of the fighting has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
incredible, right?
It's really incredible. It's like... like even when you see old films of the NFL back in the leather helmet or football in the leather helmet days, football hasn't. I mean, the UFC changed more in the 20 years. I mean, it's remarkable. But yet, you and Joe Silva are still there.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, it changed radically.
And I brought both you guys in.
You did.
Yeah,
you did. Well, I was the post-fight interviewer. I'd never done any commentary ever. I had done commentary for Muay Thai. But I'd never done.
You're a professional talker.
Well, yeah, but it's still you have to learn how to do it.
Absolutely, and you got a lot better, right?
Oh, for sure. I was terrible in the beginning. It's
But you were better in the beginning than the people that we brought in on that first show.
Yeah, maybe. Well,
you were a serious upgrade.
I had the benefit of first of all of watching them make mistakes. That's a huge benefit.
True enough.
And then the other benefit was I was a huge fan and always have been. I've been a fan since that tape that I picked up at that Hollywood video store.
And that was 2? That was the first
was number
one
2, yeah. And then I started training.
That was a good show.
Fuck yeah, it was. I started training soon after that. And I remember thinking, man, this is, I hope this works out. I hope this takes off. Because I remember when I looked at the very box that had the UFC on it, the first time I found out about the UFC, I looked at that box and went, wow, they did it. They did it. Because this is something that everybody in MMA had talked about, or I should say MMA, everyone in martial arts. There are no martial arts anymore. There's styles, but everything is essentially, in my eyes, MMA is martial arts now. It's not, this idea of mixed martial arts.
In your world, yeah. I mean, I think they're still teaching kids Taekwondo.
Sure, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing,
no.
But martial arts is MMA. It is martial arts. And when we were coming up, like I was a Taekwondo guy, and I had friends that did karate, and I had another friend that did this, and everyone always wanted to know what was the best. And you didn't know. You really had no idea. You had no idea until the UFC came along. It was all just speculation, and everyone was convinced that their style of judo was unstoppable, or their Shotokan was the best death touch, and whatever it was all just shit talking and guesswork. But when I looked at that box, I remember very clearly thinking in my head, wow, they fucking did it. They actually did it. Like, this was the thing that everybody had always talked about.
Yeah.
Get everybody together, make them duke it out, Kumite style, like a fucking Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
In a cage.
But even better, because he was in a cage.
Big octagon.
When I would tell people, when I was working for you guys, I was on News Radio, which is an NBC sitcom. Fortunately, News Radio was not doing well and it wasn't popular, so the network didn't come up to me and go, hey, fuckhead, what are you doing cage fighting commentator for?
The advertisers are very uncomfortable with your side gig.
They didn't have any problem because that show could have been canceled every year. It would almost got canceled.
That was a good show, Joe.
It was a very good show.
It
was a very good show.
Good characters.
But we didn't have the benefit of political backing, so we got moved a lot, and it was never like a guarantee. But when I was doing it, people would talk to me like I was doing porn. They would talk to me like I was off like shooting porn on the weekend. They're like, "What are you doing? You're doing cage fighting? Why are you doing that? Why are you interviewing cage fighters?" I was like, "I like watching it." And people would look at you like there's something wrong with you for liking watching it.
I like watching it.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, I got seriously judged by people in the industry back then when it was not popular at all.
I commiserate. And when I moved to Larchmont, which is a snooty little town in Westchester outside of New York, my wife goes, "Please don't tell anyone what you do." The UFC had paid for the house.
Isn't that hilarious?
Please don't, if you could not bring it up.
Yeah. It's much more acceptable now. I mean,
no, absolutely. It's
now,
on Fox. It's it's rumored to be an Olympic sport in the making. So,
well, that would make sense. But if you have curling as an Olympic sport, I think
don't knock. That's my
MMA
people.
In. Your people, you Canadian?
Well, Scottish. Which is
the Scottish curl as well, right?
Well, they invented curling, and the Canadians are Scottish because that Drink Canada Dry. The Scots thought that was a challenge, so they all went to Drink Canada Dry. That's an old whiskey joke. I'm sorry. The 3 Scottish listeners you have are busting a gut right now, though. I love the Canada Dry material.
I was on one of those shows like Best Damn Sports Show or something like that way back in the day, and I was telling them, I said, I think it's going to be an enormous national sport one day, and they were laughing. They thought it was hilarious.
There's a lot of stick and ball guys in the sports business that still are waiting for it to go away. They don't like rock and roll or hip hop either.
Well, there was some shithead on who does amateur football. He does college football, and he was talking about after Anderson Silva broke his leg that this is the reason why he would never cover the UFC, never has, never will. And MMA fans.
I'm sure.
Got
what
really
was the
offended.
reason?
Because Anderson broke his leg.
Because his leg got broken.
Exactly. And I'm
he
like,
he's
a fucking
football.
football guy.
Yeah.
Not only that, he's college football. Well, they don't even make money. They're getting head injuries for free. Well, and the colleges are making billions of dollars.
Well, the Are No Rules guy's not commenting on other sports, Joe. Well, I'm not doing that.
The No Rules guy. Well, those guys, those fucking higher moral ground sports guys, they're ridiculous.
But there's a real reason for it, and it is. And if you look at the NFL, with NFL films that turned the sport into a heroic endeavor. And I think NFL Films was really changing in the media business and in the sports business because they turned football into this epic story, and it became very advertiser friendly. And it, ends up in, the Super Bowl, which is the most advertiser friendly thing on the planet, right? So I think that whole thing was built out, and anything that rocks the boat, the way we rocked the boat with boxing when Tyson was moved from pay-per-view to Fox, opposite the Ultimate, back in the day, there hadn't been a heavyweight boxing match on broadcast in, I think, 16 years. And strangely, Tyson is put up against our Tournament of Champions. That's not a coincidence. So I think when you're protecting something, it's a siege mentality. And I think a lot of the pure sports guys still feel a little bit threatened by the UFC.
Well, you better tell Dana White, because Dana White will put shows on. Well, he used to always do that. Put Spike shows on opposite of Affliction or opposite.
God bless Dana.
He likes to go to war.
I am the number one Dana fan. I gotta say, he's the greatest.
If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be working for the UFC this time around.
Well, none of us would be sitting here talking about the UFC if it wasn't for him.
Well, I had no intentions of going back and doing commentary. I was totally talked into it by him. I was watching the fights like cage side. That's back when Goldberg and who else was doing it with them? Jeff from Hook and Shoot, Jeff Osborne, and Blatnick. They were doing it. That was 2001 or 2.
Yeah, 2000, 2001.
Yeah, so I was just watching.
Look, Dana got it the way I got it, the way you got it, and instantly, and then was in, and then you're in. And and you're a Mormon. You can't, you're going to have 4 wives or whatever.
Wear the special underwear.
Yeah, whatever it is, you are in. The UFC has that effect.